The moment an island nation is swallowed. Tonight, terrifying video from Tonga as it's hit by a tsunami. Frightening explosions followed by silence. And here's why. The biggest underwater volcanic eruption ever captured on satellite, shaking the seas 10,000 kilometres away. And Sydney under a tsunami warning. Bondi evacuated and beaches closed indefinitely. Novak Djokovic verdict. The tennis champion booted out of Australia on the eve of the Open. But at Melbourne Park, the stage is set for the on-court action as local hopes hit form ahead of the Grand Slam.
This is 9 News with Peter Overton.
Good evening. First tonight, Novak Djokovic's fate has finally been decided. The world number one has been booted out of Australia. The federal court handing down its judgment just moments ago after another drawn-out day of deliberations, dismissing the tennis player's appeal, handing a win to the federal government.
It's all come down to this.
Oh my God.
Novak Djokovic leaves detention, bound for his showdown with the Australian government, dragged from centre court to the federal court. Where fans of the Serbian star gathered as their hero's fate was deliberated.
He came for the right reason, to play the tennis, that's all. And he's trying to get to that court, finally, hopefully.
The immigration minister argues the world number one poses a danger to Australia, claiming in the same way the Djokovic brand is used to sell and promote products, his reputation as an anti-vax poster boy could influence some in the community.
As a human rights and law scholar, I have a little bit of a concern about that because my personal views might be one thing, how I'm perceived might be very different.
The Djokovic team said there was insufficient evidence he had strong anti-vax beliefs. The minister failed to even ask the tennis champ's current views on vaccination, and the government didn't consider the flip side of the coin, being the anti-vax sentiment that would erupt if Djokovic was deported. Lawyers for the immigration minister returned serve, telling the court the Joker's unvaccinated status at this stage of the pandemic is proof enough of his views, and Alex Hawke understood there could be unrest, whichever way his decision went.
The court's role today was not to look at whether Mr. Djokovic's visa should be cancelled or not. It's not about the merits of his argument. It's about whether there was a legal error in the way the minister assessed the evidence and the statute.
Novak Djokovic chose not to personally explain his stance on the vaccine. The government says it could have been an opportunity to set the record straight if it needed correcting, and the fact he didn't has important consequences. The drawn-out drama has cast a shadow over the Australian Open and divided players.
Imagine how he's feeling. Like, he probably just wants a little bit of support now from other players. Like, he's getting it from me. Like, what the f***?
But this was always a saga that could have been avoided.
Just get vaccinated. It's very simple. Just get vaccinated. And then everyone's time wouldn't have to be wasted with this.
Let's hope that all eyes are going to be just on the tennis courts soon.
Reid Butler, 9 News.
And we'll go live to Melbourne a little later in the bulletin for more on the Djokovic story. Well, the world has seen and felt the shockwaves of a massive underwater volcano on the doorstep of the Pacific island of Tonga. It's triggered a tsunami that's engulfed the island nation, waves reaching as far as Australia and Alaska. Tonight, there are reports Tonga is struggling with toxic air and contaminated water. Communications are crippled, leaving relatives in Australia desperate for news. And there's a warning another eruption could happen at any time. Eddie Meyer begins our coverage.
It's been described as the most violent eruption captured on satellite, with the equivalent force of a magnitude 5.8 earthquake. At sea level, the eruption resembled a mushroom cloud, a mass of steam, ash and rock surging out of the ocean 20 kilometres into the air. Within 20 minutes, a rush of waves hit the tiny island nation. Startled locals rushed to find higher ground as water crashed its way through. A river flooding streets and buildings, including this church. Some were caught out by the rising tide. Panicked locals rushed to get to safety, jamming streets. This volcano erupted with a rude shock in the late afternoon local time.
We're all standing up. My hand is shaking. What are we gonna do? Can you guys hear that? It keeps bursting. Hey, okay. See that? You guys see the smoke coming up? Massive. Ew, the volcano. It's the volcano.
The explosions ever more insistent.
Oh no. Can you guys hear that? Oh my gosh. Man, it's loud. It's shaking the island. Look at all that. That's all from the volcano. There it goes. Is your ears popping? Oh. Oh.
This desperate mum then rushes to gather her children.
Everybody get up. Let's go. Just get up. Get out.
Her anxiety rising with every passing second.
The volcano is erupting. It keeps erupting. Get up. Let's get far from here.
Others trying to stay calm as the volcano continued to make its presence felt long after the eruption subsided.
So it's currently raining volcanic rocks or ashes right now. Staying indoors because it's really bad out there on the streets.
At the other end of that call, before it cut out, Mele Sineva Kafusi, now worried about her sister, brother and nephew.
Pretty much stayed up all night. It was pretty anxious. Up to now, we haven't even heard anything from them, so we're all pretty worried, and yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Hinamoa Aholele was talking to her grandmother when she heard eruptions in the background.
Just hearing her talk on the phone, how scared she was, and the big explosion.
Mele Leapai hasn't seen her 7-year-old daughter in Tonga for 3 years because of COVID. She was trying to comfort her as ash and rocks rained down on the roof of her parents' car.
I could hear, sorry, I'm getting emotional. I could hear my 7-year-old in the background crying. And I said, what's happening? And Mom said, oh, she's crying because she's scared.
The volcano erupted 65 kilometres north of the Tongan capital, Nuku'alofa, at 3:10 p.m. yesterday afternoon, Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time. And from this tiny speck in the Pacific Ocean, shockwaves across the globe. Tsunami warnings were issued for Pacific Islands including Fiji, Samoa, Hawaii and Norfolk and Lord Howe Islands, along with the Australian East Coast, Japan, the US and Canadian Pacific Coast. The impact stretched to New Zealand, Ecuador, Peru and Chile. The Bureau of Meteorology says those shockwaves travelled at more than 1,000 kilometres an hour, reaching almost 7,000 kilometres to Perth, with the sonic boom heard in Alaska, almost 10,000 kilometres away. In Peru, tsunami waves crashed through a market, washing away stalls and goods, sending panicked shoppers running in fear of what might come next. Tsunami sirens were heard in Ecuador. With good reason, fishing boats at sea riding rolling tsunami waves. In Chile too, sirens blared as swimmers left the beach because of a strong surge of water. The waves here reached as high as 1.4 metres. In Santa Cruz, California, the rising tide caused minor flooding, but plenty of warnings. Damage too to fishing boats large and small in Japan's south. A 2-metre tidal surge and large waves washing ashore sank a number of boats and damaged others at a marina in New Zealand's far north. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern in touch with her Pacific neighbours.
Shops along the coast have been damaged and a significant clean-up will be needed. Nuku'alofa is covered in thick film of volcanic dust, but otherwise conditions are calm and stable. We've not yet received news from other coastal areas of Tongatapu or the outer islands yet.
Everything in deeply religious Tonga is usually closed on Sundays, but the Prime Minister has declared stores and bakeries can open so people can get supplies. International phone lines largely remain cut, but power is slowly being restored. Australia plans to send a surveillance flight tomorrow morning to assess damage, along with...
We are preparing for humanitarian assistance through a C-130 flight that could be deployed from Brisbane. Things like tarpaulins, water, cooking equipment.
It's a start and more will follow once communications are restored. So far there have been no reports of deaths or injuries in Tonga, but this was 7 times more powerful than the eruption on December 20 last year. Eddie Meyer, 9 News.
And this is breaking as we go to air. These are pictures coming out of Tonga showing the extent of the damage from the volcanic eruption and tsunami. Roads are flooded, walls and fences have crumbled. At this point, there are no reports of deaths or injuries. Well, many Tongans have made their home among us. Others come for seasonal work. Their presence never more valued than now, during COVID. The distance and the breakdown in communication systems has them desperately worried about families and friends back home.
Was the blast that shattered the stillness of an island nation. But thousands of kilometres away, it's left a silence that's hard to bear.
You feel so helpless, you can't do anything.
Speaking to her sister Lupita late yesterday, 18-year-old Isabella Fennick in Newcastle. Too far away to help, but listening on as disaster struck.
It was like really loud, everything was shaking. It sounded like hail, but it was all just like the ashfall and rock from the volcano itself. And you could hear like massive explosions, like they sounded like fireworks. I didn't sleep last night. I stayed up all night.
In Sydney, no word either from Reverend Marta Javier Hilio's sister since yesterday.
My sister's home is on the foreshore. I am certain that she is not there, but hopefully have gone to higher ground. It's leaving messages in hope that she will pick up a bar of internet.
More than 30,000 Tongans live in Australia. A worried community today gathered online to watch home broadcasts. Here, COVID is limiting gatherings, but they're keeping the faith.
Just the thought of knowing how our families live in Tonga with so little, to imagine what they are going through right now, particularly during the night time. We've had this whole prayer chain that's been going during the night because we know that when it's nighttime in Tonga, there's no light.
There's going to be a need, a desperate need, urgent need for help from Australia and New Zealand.
Our country is among Tonga's closest neighbours, and even here on our packed beaches, the island disaster is being felt. The event triggering a tsunami warning right along Australia's east coast. The SES sounding the alarm at Bondi at 10:30 last night.
Please get off the beach.
Doesn't look like the ocean is going to turn into a tsunami. I've got no idea.
Today, the Nutrigrain Iron Series cancelled.
As a public safety organisation, we've got a responsibility to the community and to our members to make sure we remain safe.
This is way bigger than what the Ironman series is.
The National Nippers Carnival at Manly, a smaller event thanks to COVID, and this morning, landlocked.
Beach events are still running, even though the water is closed to all public.
Maroubra, Coogee, Balmoral, people told East Coast beaches were off limits, but no major waves, and from swimmers, no major reaction Sydney-wide.
It's not too bad. It's not any bigger than... It's not like a tsunami day or anything.
Crisis averted on our beaches, but for Tongan families, a desperate mission. No word from the cut-off nation. Their loved ones need supplies.
We'll welcome anybody to donate through the Tonga Australia Chamber of Commerce. We'll be facilitating it. We have locations and factories where they can drop the goods off and we pack them for them.
Our hearts are with our people in Tonga.
Ruth Wynne-Williams, 9 News.
Also feeling the effects of the eruption is Fiji and its many remote islands. Some villages in the outer lying areas of the Pacific are underwater, with the eruption triggering huge tidal surges.
A usually calming ocean view, more ominous than ever.
What just happened?
Water coming into land. It's never happened before.
Monster tidal surges in Fiji, a domino effect from the undersea eruption more than 800 kilometres away. Close enough to hear the danger coming.
Yeah, like boom, and the people are assuming that it's like a warship going on.
Australians holidaying in Suva also feeling the threat.
We just kept on hearing just massive boom noises in the clouds up until around 10:30 at night.
In the firing line of the shaken seas, tiny island communities.
The experience that we are having right now, and see the waves that are coming in. Marina, look at this.
Homes, businesses and resorts slowly going under, some families scrambling with water lapping more than 30 metres past the high tide mark.
We really do have those fears for the safety of some of the people in the outlying islands.
This one is a big wave, man. Look at that. The high tide is so big that half of the property is underwater.
Hospitals, even among those forced to evacuate to higher ground.
Shifted all the patients up to Ratfenau Secondary School, where it's safer.
The unfolding chaos put holidays to Fiji on hold today. Flights from Sydney cancelled this morning.
Cairns. Yeah, the tsunami kicked it all off.
Because of the volcano, the ash, and the pilot couldn't fly. He wasn't comfortable to fly.
More importantly, access to these island nations has been made near impossible for humanitarian aid. The ash cloud also affecting satellite communication, forcing teams to wait.
Hopefully that New Zealand government flight can be enabled to take off in the coming hours or the coming day or so to do that reconnaissance, to be able to give us more data to go on than we have at the moment.
Hayley Francis, 9 News.
Sophie Upcroft is with me in the studio. Sophie, this is a significant geological event.
Pete, volcanologists say this is the largest eruption in the Ring of Fire since 1991. The Hunga Tonga Hunga Hapai volcano is about 64 kilometres north of the Tongan capital. It has been active for years, but an explosion of this scale only happens here once every 1,000 years. The underwater explosion pushed a huge amount of material up out of the seabed, shifting the water above. The change in water levels created waves that radiated out in a ripple effect. In this case, felt across the whole Pacific Ocean, sending a column of pulverised rock, ash, sulphuric gas and steam up 20 kilometres into the air, developing into a plume 260 kilometres wide. We are likely to see a series of smaller eruptions next.
It could be days to weeks to months. It's not clear. These Ring of Fire volcanoes, in a way, behave according to a pattern, but sometimes it's really quite individualistic.
The eruption has resulted in Australia's highest tsunami waves in 60 years, our east coast recording between 80 centimetres and 1 metre. While this might not sound big, they do pack a punch.
The waves are both longer in terms of the time between waves, so that's a longer period, and because of that, they carry a lot more energy, and so they have the potential to create a lot more damage. They're also able to push further up into our estuaries.
A marine threat warning was issued from Fraser Island down to Tasmania. While the waves are getting smaller, this area has been reduced, but could be upgraded again if there are further eruptions.
Sophie, thank you. Amber's with me in the studio as well. Amber, a tsunami warning remains in place along the New South Wales coast.
Yes, Pete, good evening to you. Tsunami wave action is still being observed along parts of the east coast, so a warning will stay in place until there's been at least several hours without any activity. There's a hazardous surf warning in place from Byron Bay all the way down to the Illawarra, with dangerous rips, waves and strong ocean currents. Right now, the swell is around 1.8 metres, and that's producing waves of 5 to 6 foot plus. New South Wales beaches will remain closed until further notice. Due to the dangerous conditions, swimmers and surfers are being warned to stay clear. That big surf is expected to hang around all week. Pete?
Amber, thank you. Returning to our top story now, and Novak Djokovic has lost his appeal in the federal court and he will now be deported. Nine's Reid Butler is in Melbourne for us. Reid, good evening. Reaction to the decision has been swift.
Good evening, Pete. Yeah, at times this has felt like the never-ending story, but tonight, finally, an outcome. The federal court ruling against Novak Djokovic in favour of the federal government, meaning the world number one will likely be deported. This is the reaction from his fans here outside the federal court tonight. They have been gathered here for most of the day. The legal teams for both sides have about 20 more minutes to decide whether they want to put any more information towards the panel of judges, but I'm told that is unlikely. From here, Novak Djokovic will likely be returned to detention ahead of his deportation. The world number one, Peter, is not used to losing. This bruising battle, which has ended in defeat, is one that he surely will not forget anytime soon. Game, set, match. Pete.
All right, Reid, thank you. Now to Nine's Europe correspondent, Kari-Anne Greenbank in Belgrade. Kari, how is Serbia taking this verdict?
Well, Pete, it's just after 8 a.m. here in Serbia, so many Serbians are waking up to this news, but safe to say it won't be going down well. Speaking with locals on the streets, they're describing Novak Djokovic quite simply as king. There's a real sense of personal connection and pride in him as a tennis hero and in his performance. So the fact that he will no longer be able to compete for his 21st Grand Slam is a real blow to Serbian pride. The papers have been running front pages of this story, all of the developments in Australia for days now. This one reads, Djokovic in between policies and rights. And that headline has just been updated to read the biggest shame in sporting history. Now, I've also spoken with Novak Djokovic's family. They say they will be holding a press conference later in the day, and it is widely expected there will be further rallies, potentially outside the Australian Embassy. Pete?
Kari-Anne Greenbank in Belgrade, thank you. Back home now, and the Hawkesbury River at Windsor has become the focus tonight in the search for missing 9-year-old Charlize Mutton. We'll update you next. Suspicions the southwest firebug is at it again. A home at Claymore deliberately torched. Look who's back. Former President Donald Trump rallies supporters and no topic is off the table. And meet the first two members of Australia's Winter Olympic team, ready to take us all on their journey for curling gold.